right. Well, good afternoon or good morning, depending on whenever you're listening to the recording of the podcast. Right now, we are live streaming. We've got a couple special guests with us today, as we did last week. But today we have former third director from Prosper High School, Mr. Spencer Smith, good buddy of mine. How are you doing?
Not bad at all. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yep. And then also we have the second director and brass extraordinaire, Jacob Grady from Hurst Junior High. Old school, rep it in the house, the rivals from across town from the other side of the tracks. So, Jacob, how are you?
Doing well, man. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Hey, Jacob. He's
So
a former student of mine. I'm very excited about this.
yes, there's all these cross relations coming on here. Spencer and I have known each other for like 4 decades. So crazy story for people who don't know. Spencer
4
and I,
decades. Didn't you just turn like 22 or something?
It's been a good amount of time. We love to tell our kids that story that Ben and I have known each other since elementary school. And really, we have, me and Ben have followed a nearly identical trajectory coming through elementary school all the way through Prosper. Really, the only difference is that, after I graduated from college, I spent 2 years in Klein ISD at Klein Oak High School while Ben was here at Prosper. But other than that quick diversion, it's pretty much been almost the exact same thing.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I remember the moment I was in the Rogers Band Hall. I think I was working with Ben Ani at the time. He's been on the podcast before, but John Alstron gives me one of these, the come here finger. And I walk over to him and I was like, what's up? And he's like, what do you think about Spencer Smith? And I was like, he's awesome. Why?
Jerk.
Because initially you had Spencer, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had applied for the Rogers job.
That's right. So I initially applied for the Rogers job because that's where Brandon was teaching at the time. And I knew both Brandon and John from when I was in high school. They were both former teachers. And so I had been looking to move back up to Dallas just because I wanted to be closer to home since I'm from the, Fort Worth area anyway. And, it just so happened that at the time that I was kind of starting to look for jobs, that position over at Rogers opened up and one thing led to another. And they wound up shuffling some people around and actually asked me to move to the high school after I'd applied to the middle school job just because I had a little bit of drum corps experience. And so I kind of wound up being a chess piece in that way, but I'm really glad that things kind of unfolded the way that they did. And, I really enjoyed working at Prosper and getting to know those kids. And so, all that stuff happens for a reason, and I'm glad that it unfolded the way that it unfolded. So
yeah, dude, it's been awesome to have you up here while you've been here. Jacob, I know you're also a Coug. We got 3 Cougs and a Baldwin Wallace, whatever you guys are, the fighting trumpet players.
We are the Yellow Jackets. Our pet
so
band was called the
intimidating.
Swarm.
Y'all should be the Baldwin Wallace Murder Hornets. That would be. But anyway, so Jacob, how did you end up back here in the Metroplex? It's like we all got drawn back here after we went to U of H.
Yeah, it's like, finished up high school and everything. I actually went to a little itty bitty town south of Dallas Fort Worth area for a long time. Moved up here in 7th grade. More people in the junior high than were in the town that I lived in before.
Really?
Yeah,
I don't think I knew that.
The official population, it was Godly, Texas, I think was like 798 or something like that. And there were like 800 plus kids at the junior high. And oh my gosh. So did that thing.
Godly, did I say that right? Godly, Texas?
Godly, Texas.
Wow.
That's an
Interesting place. Interesting place.
I'm going to look that up.
Sounds like a city with some great casseroles.
One of the nicest things anyone's ever said. It's good. So did that whole thing, got up here. Like I actually started band a year before they started in HUB ISD. Did that whole thing, and then got yelled at by Steve Madsen, very lovingly, of course. John Alstron was the person who kind of pushed me toward UH, went to UH, and then, as I was graduating, it was one of those points where it was like, I'd really like to be home. Grandparents are getting older, parents are getting older, would like to return. And lo and behold, job opened up and threw my hat in the ring, was in contact with a bunch of former teachers and mentors, and got really blessed and ended up where I am.
So one thing we need to contact U of H about is getting John Alstron into the recruitment department, because apparently he's pretty good at that whole thing.
He should be paid on commission.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
So
it's funny, Jacob, you talked about Steve Madsen yelled at you. I mean, that doesn't he just yell at everyone normally?
That's his default volume. And it's
that's just his volume. His sweet hello voice is hi.
when he asked to marry his wife, he was like, "I love you."
Marry me.
Yeah,
Oh boy.
I would love to have dinner with Steve Madsen again.
Yeah,
So
legend.
obviously, we want to talk a lot about the coronavirus situation. We're curious to see how it's affected you guys. So why don't we start with Spencer? Spencer, talk to me about what you were doing before COVID and like kind of how like what life's been like, and then any other things that you've kind of noticed, or maybe skills that you've developed during this time of quarantine.
Sure. So obviously what coronavirus interrupted in the moment was basically we were in the middle of our UIL season getting prepared to do, sight reading and concert contest. And so that was the first thing that got disrupted. And so one of the first things we did for the kids was we just kind of gave them an assignment based on something that was familiar. And so we had them pass off UIL music. Just because at that point in time, we were just trying to give them anything that felt, even remotely structured, because everything was so up in the air that we wanted to be at least kind of moderately predictable. Just kind of while we found our own legs and the kids kind of found theirs. So we started off doing a couple of pass offs, but we realized pretty quickly that doing bands in any sort of Zoom or online instantaneous sound setting was going to be challenging. And so we started to move really more towards individual development. And so we were encouraging kids to participate in our school concerto competition, which became optional, but that was sort of intended to be a project for kids who really wanted to push themselves and really take advantage of all the time they've had during coronavirus to get better on their horn and kind of showcase that for the district. So that's kind of been the I guess you could say the carrot at the end of the stick that we've been dangling is some scholarship opportunities for kids that wanted to participate in that. But other than that, we really have had to get creative with our content because, right, the individual improvement on the instruments is great. And, the fact that lessons seems like it's kind of gone, has continued uninterrupted even during coronavirus has been really helpful in that regard. And so Brandon had the idea that we start to do things like community service assignments. And so one of the assignments was for the kids literally just to play their instrument for a neighbor or for a family member or for grandma or grandpa over a Zoom meeting, just so that we can spread some sort of positivity. And I thought that was a brilliant idea on Brandon's part. And then another thing that we kind of expanded with that was we did some more ensemble recording listings. And so while we couldn't play as an ensemble, we were able to find recordings of ensembles like Marcus High School and some Leander schools, some, pretty well-known schools in Texas. And we kind of asked the kids to assess those performances and kind of pretend like they were an adjudicator for the day. So if you were a UIL judge for this recording of this band, what are the things that make them sound elite? Can you pick out anything that sounds like an obvious error on their part? And, obviously to make sure they weren't stepping on toes, we tried to get the kids to err on the side of like, what are the things that make this band elite instead of kind of picking at them like a UIL judge would. Right. But that was a great opportunity for them to kind of use the vocabulary that we use during school, like listening responsibilities and balance and, who's supposed to be the main line and who's supposed to be the secondary line and the tertiary line. All of those ensemble skills were things that we could teach them through other bands' recordings, even though we ourselves couldn't do a full ensemble rehearsal. And so obviously, those things worked out pretty well for the time being, but coronavirus has obviously just limited us to mostly individual work besides that. And so it'll be really interesting when we come back to school. I think that you'll have a range of students where you've got the kids who are probably taking, some time off during coronavirus where they're kind of falling behind a little bit. But you've also got kids on the other end of the spectrum that are like, oh my gosh, like I have so much time to practice every single day. And those kids are going to exponentially shoot through the roof. And I've already seen a couple of instances from that. Judging our concerto competition, like we've got like 7 or 8 kids where they have gotten tremendously better because they are taking advantage of this time to get better at their instrument. So I think that when we come back, you're going to see a pretty significant gap from the kids that really used their time wisely during this time and the kids that kind of were maybe more meh about it or didn't take advantage.
Well, I think I think you made a ton of interesting points, but the one that I was thinking about is that you've got, like, during this time, we're having to come up with a lot of new resources and not a lot of new ways to kind of get our kids not only learning, but keep the momentum rolling, like keep that momentum ball rolling. And one of those things that you mentioned was listening to other people's recordings and listening to them, not just like, leisurely driving around in your car, but like listening to them with the intent to say, what makes them elite, so that we can start to implement that into not only our own practice time, but into our own ensemble practice time. So what I'm doing right now, and what Michael's been doing, is we've kind of been using the interwebs to kind of help our kids learn music, like between lessons, so to speak. So I think what's going to be really cool coming out of this, and we're just talking about the band world here. I mean, this is going to happen in the medical field. This is going to happen in all different styles of like management and stuff like that. We're going to be able to not only go back to life as normal, but to implement these new tactics that we've learned in order to make learning even more effective and even more efficient. So, Jacob, how have things been over at the HJH, the Red Raiders?
Realistically, like all things considered, it's been pretty solid. A few situations that we have to deal with. It is technically a Title I school, so you have a little more of that socioeconomic diversity.
I was going to ask you about that. Mm-hmm.
And so one of the great things the district really, and this is something I think, causes a lot of conversation, but put more technology in kids' hands, checked out from the district, stuff like that, just to provide them with hotspots, Chromebooks, like something that's low cost but effective. We've been able to do a lot of that. All of the kids in the second band at Hurst Junior High had already been doing recording assignments through Google Classroom all year. Them, it was really a fairly easy transition into, hey, a lot like what Spencer was saying they did. We went from UIL music and just went right along with what we were doing, trying not to blow their minds too much at once. And we started experimenting a little bit with listening assignments. We did, when the Dallas Wind Symphony, they rebroadcast a concert on a 1011. We were like, hey, here it is. Here are the 9 pieces. Listen to this. Tell us which one's your favorite and why. Just one of those things, getting them used to using Google Forms, because it's all like Spencer was talking about as well. It's that structure, that process, that, some sort of organization for kids, for them to feel comfortable, because whether or not they know it, they're craving that structure, that rigidity, that some sort of routine. Mm-hmm. Went through that, kept moving. And then it was getting ready for end of the year auditions and stuff. And it's obviously, this is way different than our process normally is, but hey, make sure you're turning in 1 recording a week, everything. We'll listen to it. If you get it turned in, we're going to be good, just so we can kind of get a litmus test for how we're doing. And it's, I'm not saying we're getting 100% of kids turning things in, but we're getting a good participation rate. We're doing meetings with them, which are part information and then part just joking around. Like the end of my last meeting with my band was, we were discussing which was better, IHOP or Denny's. And obviously
that is so controversial.
And I don't know if I can go with that. IHOP has the different flavor syrups.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Because immediately kids who are sitting there, being very respectful and listening, suddenly everyone's and it's just fun stuff like that, like also providing that sense of community, because, so many kids will complain about school, but I don't think we have a single kid at this point who's saying, oh, I'm so glad we're still out of school. Like it's, and that's
I don't think we have that either.
Yeah. It's just one of those things that band offers is that socialization aspect as well, because it's that whole, like, multiple people coming together for the common goal, stuff like that. And it's been really beneficial for them, I think, just to still have that sense of community. And that's been one of the biggest pushes we've had at Hurst, is still making them feel like they're a part of it, and making sure, like, it's really easy to become disconnected at this point. And so just making sure that, nets cast wide, arms are wide open, come join us.
Right. So I know up in Prosper, we've had a lot of events up at the middle schools that I've been seeing on social media and stuff, where they've been kind of doing like end of year recognition, end of year rewards, where they're almost doing like a quasi like drive through where, everybody's got their masks on and all that kind of stuff. So have you guys been able to do anything like that, or are you all going to kind of steer clear of that?
You can go for it, Spencer.
Okay, perfect. So we are doing that. And funny enough, after we're getting off of this podcast, one of the things that I have to do is we've got some students who have nominated teachers as like honorary educators if they're in the top 10%. And so it's kind of cool. Like we get to, take a box of, I think it's like cookies or something like that, and just kind of drop it off at their house with a sign and like a letter that we wrote to the kid, and the kid wrote a letter to us in return. And so it's it's a really kind of cool way to stay connected and kind of, you know, recognize those kids that got into the top 10%. The only question I've kind of had is like, how do we do the picture? Because they want us to take a picture, and so I'm like, you know, do I wear gloves and like stand 6 feet away and like awkward, you know,
turn it to the side like this, and then you could do a wide frame.
Panoramic.
That's right. And so it's real interesting. But the student that nominated me was one of our drum majors, Maddie Weaver, and she is going into music education to the University of Houston. So she's following in the same track that me and Ben did. And so, yeah, and Jacob. And so it's a really cool thing to see. So we are doing stuff like that. And one of the nice things about Prosper is that, you know, Prosper is so the experience between the district and the people that it's serving is really important, and they want the community to recognize that. So I really feel like the district has kind of gone above and beyond to make sure that, you know, the seniors feel like, you know, even though they didn't get the end of the year that every other senior is going to get, they're going to get something that's meaningful. And, you know, they know that, you know, the district is trying really hard to make sure that those kids get the recognition that they've, you know, earned and deserve. So, so I think it's been awesome. I'm really proud of the way that Prosper has kind of handled the whole thing.
And Jacob, what about you guys? Have you guys been able to put anything together like that?
Yeah, we've done a few things. I know, like, especially from the top down, the high school had a whole drive-by to celebrate the seniors and stuff like that.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm.
It was really cool. It was like a whole 3.5 hour thing with all the teachers, you know, going crazy for every single kid who drove through. You know, and it's just that kind of thing, you know, you're celebrating what you do with them. We're currently trying to figure out how to honor our 9th graders, and at our school, you know, the 9th graders are the last kids who go through the junior high. So we still have the 9th graders. The freshmen aren't up at the high school yet. So we're trying to figure out a way to do that. We normally give out medals at the spring concert, you know, to all the 9th graders, just because, you know, I don't care if they weren't first year, first band in, you know, HEB honor band, and they didn't win every single award. They gave 3 years of their life to us. We got to spend 3 years with them, see them grow and mature, want to honor them. So we're kind of toying around with some different ways to do that, you know, start trying to follow all the rules, but still honor our kids and celebrate them.
Was that your first year as a teacher? Was their first year as middle schoolers? Or is that?
So this is my third. The first kids that I saw are just now, they're going to become seniors next year. So it's really kind of.
Oh, wow. You've been teaching for a lot longer than I realized. My bad.
Year 3.
How'd you get so old, Jacob? Jeez.
Day at a time.
One day at a time. Well, good job on that. Wow. So actually, I have some questions for you three guys. Unless you've been more to contribute, Jacob. So I'm the oddball here. I didn't. You three went to high school at the same place. You three went to college at the same place. And I think it'd be interesting for you three to talk a little bit about the education that you got. And so take it away. Who wants to start? LD Bell, University of Houston.
Oh, I want to make a point about LD Bell real quick. That well, Spencer, you kind of got this more than anybody else did, but it's funny whenever we come up here and like we go to Prosper, and Prosper's had an incredibly successful marching program over the past 4 years. Just watching the evolution of it has been kind of gnarly. But one of the funniest things was when we first came out with the kind of more intense summer schedule, all the kind of like, it raised so many heads. And I was like, I remember our first year, whenever we did a show called Prayer for Light back in 2009, 2010 season. And the summer schedule was like 7 to 9:30 p.m. Like you're talking like 14 and a half hours, like every single day, with like a break for lunch and a break for dinner. And that was just like, that was implanted in our brain as just kind of like the norm. And I think, you know, that was a Jeremy Earnhardt thing. But Spencer, like you remember, dude, that like Daniel Matthews would make a joke about, like, if rehearsal ended at 11 and we got out at 10:59, Daniel Matthews was like, 1 minute, we got 1 minute off of rehearsal. So to hear, you know, it's just funny that's kind of what we grew up with. And then I think maybe Jacob, it got a little bit more relaxed as we kind of went through the program. You know, we'd get like a Saturday night block off, and it was like, what's going on? There's something wrong. They're redesigning the show. But anyways,
you know, it's funny that you bring that up, because that, you know, a lot of that sort of intensity from the students is kind of what I like. Whenever I think of Bell, you know, in retrospect now, I think of, you know, and this could be me just kind of thinking back in a rosier picture of what Bell actually was, just because I was in high school at the time. But I feel like I remember there was such a large percentage of that band program and the kids that was so competitively driven that, you know, the intensity was pretty high, you know, from student to student.
Yeah.
And that may be kind of my own perception, because I was that type of kid when I was in high school and I kind of hung out with those other types of kids, but that's really how it felt. Like, it felt like a large percentage of that program was really competitively driven. And so that intensity I remember a lot. And I remember that there was a lot of sort of student accountability. And, you know, my era of Bell was, I was kind of in that transition between, I had Jeremy Earnhardt for my first 2 years as the head director, and then Dan Matthews was my head director for my senior year. And I just remember that Jeremy Earnhardt was so goofy all of the time. And I think that it was impressive that he could really act as silly as he wanted to be. And the kids were so regimented and had all their ducks in such a row that he could afford to be silly and there would still be that structure. And I think that's a testament to the culture that they built with him and before him that the kids kind of carried on. But I remember section leaders like getting on to other kids and, like, you know, really kind of laying the hammer down, like from student to student, in a way that it's just kind of rare to see that now.
Yeah,
in a band program. And
we were terrified of the seniors. I mean,
yeah,
Stephen Clemmer and Daniel Matthews. I mean, Rebecca Cook didn't even have to be mean to me. She just was intimidating. Like, Daniel Matthews would like show off his chest hair. He'd be like, "You don't have this." You're like, "Oh my gosh, you're right. I don't."
Life lessons from Daniel Matthews. I hope he's tuning in.
Speaking of hair, Ben, Tom Neal says that your beard looks great.
Oh, I love you, Tom.
Yeah, he said great job on your beard.
Thanks, Tom.
What do you say about my beard, Tom?
I haven't said anything yet.
I know.
So Jacob, I mean, let's talk a little bit about U of H, because U of H is kind of like a topic. John Benzer's leaving U of H, so it's kind of an interesting turn of events there. Is he retiring, or is he going to do some more consulting work? Do you know? Does anybody know?
More consulting work. He's going to kind of shift the focus toward that.
Yeah, Jacob, you were pretty close with him. I don't. Obviously, we're not going to go into any details that are unnecessary, but do you know if he's got a replacement, or like, because he was like he was like the big cheese of education there, and like the reason why the job success rate was so insane at U of H, you know. So, do you know anything about that?
I don't really know much about anything related. I know that he's making the shift, but I don't know how they're going to transition from that. I, of course, trust him to have that, because I know they've seen this coming for a while, just because where he is in his career and stuff like that. No one teaches forever.
Right. But so Spencer and Jacob, talk about the education side of U of H. If anybody's thinking about going into education, like, why should they go to U of H? Or obviously we want to consider other options as well. But maybe some pros about U of H that you guys experienced there.
Sure. And I think you hit it right on the head. We don't want to pigeonhole anyone into thinking that, we're like U of H superior type people. But and the weird thing is that U of H actually looks much different now than it even did when I graduated 5 years ago. You've got, Corey Meals is doing some pretty significant work in the ed department. And, you've got Dana Pratervon there now, who I student taught with when she was still at Oak Ridge. And I know a lot of former student teachers from about 4 or 5 years ago also student taught with her. So that is a fit that made a lot of sense. And I think she's outstanding. I mean, I learned a lot from her when I was student teaching at Oak Ridge. And, if she's the number 2 at U of H, then I feel really comfortable sending, just about any kid there. So I still think it's a, phenomenal school for music education and one of the premier programs in Texas. But other than that, the applied faculty is probably mostly the same. My former teacher, Danny Vincent, is still there. I'm not sure about Trumpet World. Jacob can probably help me out on that end, but that's kind of the current status of the education at U of H, I think. Everything seems to be going really well.
Is Jim Vassallo still playing trumpet up there?
I I don't know if Asalo still is, because I know he had some health issues the past few years. I think it got pretty significant. He also was helping with his mom, stuff like that. So I think he may at least be doing a little bit less there. I studied with Mr. Austin, who is
James Austin.
There we go. This is so funny. So, I find it so hard not to call you Mr. Attaway. It's almost like
yeah, stop that.
We talked about how twisted the family tree is trumpet wise. When I was student teaching, I actually student taught with Dana Pradervon as well. And then student taught with Warren Seago, who taught
yeah. My old trumpet teacher.
Wow, dude. Yeah. What the heck is going on around here?
Like a shrub at this point, but it's really good. No, and I Spencer, everything you said about Pradervon, absolutely. It's one of those things. I learned a lot there. We actually had a region meeting today at 10 a.m. for Region 31, and she popped in and was talking just the leadership she provides. It's that kind of forward thinking with a lot of how they're already adjusting, through TEA, TMEA, and UIL for just how we're handling, COVID-19, everything like that. It's pretty incredible. I mean, if that's the kind of resource that you have at the University of Houston, that's definitely one you should lean on.
Yeah.
Well, I guess. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Michael.
I don't know. I was making a noise with my face. That happens sometimes.
Sorry to interrupt the noise from your face.
Well, it's a gift.
Well, and I'll actually kind of go bounce back. So back from U of H back to Bell. You guys were talking about what we sort of remember about our days at Bell going back then. And, I talked about the intensity of the students, but really one of the other things I remember the most is Bell felt like a lot of the core values in the band program were built into 6 or 7 catchphrases that were said so many times that, you don't ever forget it. And there's some that I'm forgetting, but one of the ones that I think about the most often is it's 10% what happens and 90% how you react to it. And, I think that, I know Jeremy Earnhardt didn't say that originally. I can't remember who the original quote is from, but he said it so many times that at least as a kid, he had me believing that he was the person that invented that phrase. And I just can't count. I can't count how many times I have thought that exact quote in a number of instances, whether it's, not doing as well at UIL as I thought we should have, or not doing as well at a contest, or, even life-related stuff like your car breaks down. That phrase, I think, just applies to so many facets of life that, it really isn't just about band, it's about life skills. And so you guys probably have some other quotes that are kind of floating around.
One of them is from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and it's the second habit, which is begin with the end in mind. It was said all the time. And as a side note, I was just laughing to myself how I cannot say the word however without saying comma after the word. I have to say comma after I say however, because it was repeated.
Who did that first? Was that Brandon or is it Van who used to say that all the time? I mean,
that must have been Van, because I actually don't remember hearing that one a lot. The
I'd
one
never
that I
heard
remember
that before I started working over there. I was like, he's punctuating his own speech. That's a whole new level to me.
Revolutionary.
However, comma.
The one thing that most of the kind of phrases I got were from Jeremy Earnhardt. The phrase that I remember from Van was the smart people don't get bored.
Yep.
Phrase.
Yeah.
And so that's one that I think there's a lot of truth to that one. And I didn't hear that one as much, but I mean, I actually think that, but funny enough, I actually think that applies. Yeah. It's every time you get bored ever again, it's like, oh, am I not smart? And so, obviously there's room for error in that statement, but I think it's true though, because I think during coronavirus, I've had so many people who are telling me that they are just going absolutely bonkers because they just can't think of what to do with their time. And I don't know if this is just my personality or kind of my dad kind of just raised me to kind of maximize my time, or band sort of treated me or taught me how to maximize my time. But I really don't feel like I've gotten bored during coronavirus at all. Obviously I've had other stuff going on with the software transition to kind of occupy my time, but I mean, I like every single second of every single day has been filled with something, you know, whether it's reading or doing work. And so the flexibility of coronavirus has actually been nice for me. Like, I feel like I've been able to learn a lot of different stuff and take some courses. And so that's another one that I kind of remember is the smart people don't get bored. I do like that one.
Yeah. Jacob, do you have any that you remember besides the one that we've talked about?
I mean,
I can't think of any more.
you know, trust the process. Like
Yeah.
what that really is. Or one of my favorite. It's awful, but it's great. I think about that all the time when teaching beginners. When we first sit down, we make our first sound.
That is wonderful.
You're a great kid. Like, because it's like, you know, 12 months down the road, they are going to be great. It's just in that moment, oh boy.
Yeah.
I can remember going in for an interview to work over there, and Van had me stay and watch a brass sectional. Jake, I don't know, what year did you start the high school there?
I guess it would have been 2010, 2011.
Okay, so you and I entered the same year, so you were not in that group, but I listened to the top band, and Van was running the sectionals, and he turned to me at one point and he said, "Now this that we're about to play is going to be terrible." And then he starts and it ends, and he said something. It wasn't quite, it's awful, but it's great, but it's something along the lines of, that was terrible, but it will be incredible. I was like, I like that.
Optimism.
It will be incredible. So how about John Alstrand's "What Did I Just Say"?
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, that was the biggest, like, hit you in the gut. The first year he got there, it's like, oh no, this guy is for real.
Yeah, you know what? It's so funny because if you get the right teacher like John to use that phrase intermittently, I mean, it really is a gut punch, because, you know, when you respect that teacher, it's like you don't want to disappoint them by not being able to raise your hand and let them know, because you want the teacher to know, like, yeah, like, I'm getting your information, I got it. And so the interesting thing about what's the main thing I just said is I've seen it used in a lot of different ways. And the way that John uses it is it's holding kids accountable, but it's never a fear or a shame. It's really just accountability. But I've seen some other teachers who use it as like a gotcha. And I'll even admit that there were a couple of times where I used it that way when I shouldn't have. And so it's a really interesting tool. But I remember when I was in high school, like, every time a teacher would ask that, because after John started to use it, I think Van started to kind of use it more too. And so it kind of became more of a Bell thing. But it's just one of those things where every time it got brought up, I wanted so badly to be able to raise my hand. And whenever I didn't, I was like, oh crap, like, I'm not listening hard enough. Yeah. And so that's what I remember as a kid, is like, I'm always afraid that I'm going to embarrass the kid. But really, in the kid's mind, I'm just like, oh man, like, I should have been listening. So that was kind of my experience with that phrase. But I think that's a really interesting one. And I actually catch myself using that with myself in my own learning. Like, I'll like be reading a book or like watching a tutorial, and I'll constantly ask myself, like, can you repeat back or even be able to teach the concept that you were just taught in that video? Yep. And that, you know, that's significant learning, because that's that net, you know, there's like a hierarchy or a step of, you know, understanding things, and it starts with listening, and then you know, the second step is like being able to reciprocate. But the last stage is like, can you teach that concept to someone else? Because that demonstrates the highest level of mastery on that subject. And so that's a great tool. So for anyone who's going into music education, I think if you use that one wisely, that's a great tool. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting with my work at the Covenant School. It's a classical education, and so it's studying a different way of going about and educating kids. It's the old way that we're kind of going back to, but one of the big things for the youngest kids is recitation, and literally saying back exactly what the teacher just said. So teachers will read a story to little kids and say, okay, now you tell me that story back. And there's so much to that, and there's actually a lot of studies now saying that is one of the highest levels of learning that you can do, just being able to take it in, process it, and then boom, right back out. It's yeah. I know in my own practicing, I don't mean to hog the time, but in my own practicing, one of the things that I've been doing is I've been working on memorization of etudes, and not just memorizing so that I can kind of fumble through it, but like I can play it. I can just sit down and I can just hose down an etude and it is correct every time I do it. And that is a whole new level that I've never tried.
I've got Michael, I don't know if you have a few solos like that. I've got a few solos where I don't even have to pull out the music. I can just say, hey, in the middle of measure 13, there's a dynamic octave piano and you're completely missing it. And it's like that level of understanding on the music is an incredible place to be. And I think I've got, probably like 4 or 5 different just classic trombone solos that I could do that with. Like if you asked me to play it right now, I could play it note for note with correct dynamics and all that kind of stuff. So,
but then there's the, how fast can you get to that point? Because I think we all have a tune that we've heard on the radio since we were, like 3 that we could sing back and, So since you were 3 years old, you should have something memorized. But what about something that you saw a couple weeks ago for the first time? Can you get this just memorized? That's tough, man. That's really tough.
Are there techniques that you're using that you've been reading on or anything like that?
So there's a Latin phrase that we because everything you do in classical education is Latin because we're snooty. But it's repetitio mater memoriae, which means repetition is the mother of memory. And you just repeat something over and over and over again. And that repetition that actually births the memory that you have.
Interesting.
It's kind of a gross thing that I just gave you, but.
Well, for time's sake, I want to get Jacob on a little bit more and Spencer on a little bit more about what you would suggest to anybody listening to this going forward, particularly band kids. We're still probably 3 months out at the earliest of being back to some semblance of normalcy. So do you have anything that you would suggest them to do? Jacob, or Spencer, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry about that. I'll be really quick, because I feel like I've talked a little bit more than Jacob. Really the thing that I would, impart on the students is, this is the time that you get ahead. Like it's the whole, there is a saying that goes something along the lines of, work while other people are sleeping. And that's basically what this time is like, are you using this time as break and relaxation and rewarding yourself with free time and video games? Or is this time that you're using to take advantage of, improving your own musicianship and start to really move ahead? Because those kids that are practicing, I would say that, like when I was in high school, I probably practiced, band class gives you about like 30, 45 minutes of playing. And then outside of that, I would practice about 45 minutes or an hour a day. And if I were in high school now, I'd be practicing like almost an hour and a half or 2 hours, just because, that's how much time we have. Like, you can kind of do whatever you want to with it. And the kids that are doing that are going to be the kids that are at the top whenever we come back from all of this, when it's all said and done. So that's what I would say is try and, remember that everyone else is kind of being lazy right now. So if you want to usurp them, this is the time to do that.
Yeah, there are already kids that are already doing that for sure. Jacob, can you talk about that, but like kind of an emphasis on like if you're a beginner that listens to our podcast, like what are you supposed to do? Because you just lost 3 months from your beginner year, which is it's that, like, to me that was the time when I realized I could be really good at this thing. So any advice you have for those kids?
No, I think especially like when you look at it proportionally with kids like that, 3 months at this point in their life is about 33% of their playing career. So suddenly 33% of their playing career is, way different than it used to be. I think one of the biggest things is, man, as long as you're doing things fundamentally correctly, put the horn on your base. Like, yes, you want to do different exercises. Yes, you want to hit fundamentals. You want to hit all of those important things, but don't just do fundamentals for the sake of fundamentals. Like, realize, like, hey, that you do this stuff so you can go out and play fun stuff. It should be fun, especially at a younger age. Remember that it's fun. It's okay to work hard. In fact, it's more than okay to work hard. But remember that, you originally did this because, like, you probably didn't wake up one day and be like, I really want to play trumpet because I want to spend 30 minutes a day doing lip slurs. You probably heard someone play. You're like, hey, that Louis Armstrong guy. And someone's like, hey, it's Louis. And you're like, cool.
No, it's not.
And you wanted to play like that, or you heard some pop song with it. And, where you go from there is different. But the big thing is, have fun with it. Put the instrument on your face. Look up something new you haven't played before. Try and play it. If you don't succeed, that's okay. It's okay. Like so one of the quotes that I do with beginners all the time is from Adventure Time, of all places.
Nice.
Jake the dog is talking, and he's like, I think I figured out the first step to being kind of good at something, and it's kind of sucking at it. And like, I think about that, but it's like, it's one of those things. It's like, it's okay not to have it be perfect. Just do your thing, follow your process. You have like people working with you, do the thing. Like it's wake up and do it.
I think that's great. I mean, I was talking to a good friend of mine, and he's aware that most of the time, like for us, especially during this quarantine time, if we don't just play one instrument, like Spencer, you play euphonium and guitar. I don't know, Michael, you play the trumpet, the E flat trumpet, the piccolo trumpet. But no, on a serious note, he was like, how do you just have like a musical mind? And I was like, well, I used to think that until I read Malcolm Gladwell. And then I realized that like I was just able to embrace that period of not having any freaking idea what I was doing, but looking, kind of beginning with the end in mind, like I'm going to be able to play this musical instrument. I'm sure like, for us as musicians, we can look at an instrument and be like, I can figure this out because we understand theory, we understand how notes work. But, Spencer, I don't know how old you were whenever you first started learning guitar. Do you remember?
It was middle school.
So like
7th or 8th grade.
Yeah. So your theory wasn't like incredibly strong, and it was just kind of like the joy of figuring out how to play, Iron Man on one string.
Yeah. In fact, not only was it more joy, it was completely and totally joy and zero theory. I mean, because I to this day, I would consider myself a good enough guitarist to convince people that I took lessons and had a, somewhat of a formal background and an education in it. But I mean, I can obviously read music, but I can't, look at sheet music and put guitar notes to it on the fly. Like I just don't read very well. And that's because I taught myself through tab.
Right.
Because I did read, I think I picked up guitar like maybe my second year of junior high. And so like after I had completed 1 year of band, so my theory was like, okay, like I could read the notes on the staff, but no, guitar for me was just something where it was like I was doing that purely because I just enjoyed playing guitar.
Yeah.
I think that's important.
Yeah, that mindset that you just said is what I'm trying to instill into my beginners.
Yeah, like, and it's tough too because the other trick is that when I was doing euphonium, I mean, I liked playing euphonium too, but euphonium kind of had like these there were expectations and standards which were great and those pushed me, but it's also nice to have that other thing alongside the thing with expectations where you can literally just express yourself and not have to worry about like meeting a deadline. Like it's literally you're just learning for the sake of learning and the pure enjoyment of playing an instrument.
Right.
And so I think having both of those things was really nice. You've got the thing that pushes you where you have those deadlines that you have to meet, and then you have the thing that you're just doing for fun.
Right.
So, okay, you talk about playing for the sheer enjoyment for the purpose of enjoying it. I feel like we're in a world where that's not what we do. With all these deadlines and things, and we're just being busy. How do you get there? I mean, how does a person actually say, I want to do this and actually enjoy it? And especially because it's something slow, it's not an instant,
I love video games.
Yeah. How do you think people get there?
For me, I think it was just that, as much as I think, timelines and due dates and all those things are next, like it's important for kids to learn those skills and knowing that like by this day, you need to have this down and be prepared. There is a stressful component to that too. And so when you remove the deadlines, the timelines, and the stress, and you're just doing the pure joy of the music, that for me, it just kind of came easy. And I feel like, it might be oversimplifying it to say that just removing the deadlines and all of that was mainly it, but that's kind of what it felt like. It was because I think as a kid, there was like an expectation that I'd be good at euphonium. But for guitar, it was kind of like, oh, Spencer's just like teaching himself. Like if he's good, he's good. If he's not, he's not. It's not really a big deal. And as a kid, that mattered to me. And so just being able to do something without feeling like there is a need to be good at it. I could just do it just because I want to, that was, therapeutic and fun. And, I remember being in my garage for 2 or 3 hours at a time and just, hammering out licks and sweating and, honestly, like getting blood on the fretboard because I was playing so much. And, I loved doing that. And I had my days where I did that on euphonium just as much. But euphonium was always motivated by a deadline. Guitar was motivated by just, I love doing this just because.
Yeah.
So, and it doesn't even have to be an instrument, that could be something else that could be baseball or, track for another kid. It doesn't have to be music, but for me, that's what music was. Music was my outlet and my joy that I wanted to spend my free time doing.
Yeah. And if you ask me, like my top kids, so to speak, my top players have always, like, yes, there's deadlines and stuff like that for band, of course, but they genuinely love it, and they don't have to tell me that they love it. I just listen to them every week, and I'm like, man, you've gotten really good this week. Clearly, you enjoy doing this. And they're like, yeah, I mean, it's just part of it. It's like that joy that some kids get from video games. They get from. I tell kids this all the time. If you can get the love that you have for video games for your instrument, you will be the best instrumentalist on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But anyway. Sorry.
No, you're good. That totally makes sense. I think the other thing that I kind of got from guitar is that, I fell in love with the process of getting good more than I fell in love with the results. Mm. And so, that was another thing, is that for euphonium, there is that, like, I could achieve all region or all area or whatever it was. But for guitar, it was just like, I fell in love with just getting better at something. Mm. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that.
Well, I think that as far as time goes, we're almost at the hour mark. So maybe get some final thoughts, and then we can skedaddle. What do you think, Michael?
Actually, I want to hear from Jacob. What are your final thoughts?
But just in general.
Yeah. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to leave for the kids, or any parting thoughts? Anything like that?
Oh yeah, with students who are listening to this, stuff like that, it's just. Remember why you wanted to sign up for band. Remember why you do what you do. It's finding that internal motivation can be hard, but man, once you do, it is so easy to reap. Like the benefits you reap from it are, it's almost impossible to account for all of it. And just big thing, have fun, stay safe, like connect with people. Like there's so many different ways that you can explore what you're doing, that you can kind of, push what your limits are and stuff. Like, don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to go out and just test the waters. I always teach my beginners, you're little scientists. Every time you go to play, you're doing a science experiment. And sometimes your hypothesis is going to be really wrong. It's going to be really bad. I was like, but thankfully we don't have anything that's going to explode.
Yeah. As one of the guys that I worked with for years, Jason Oliver, says, it's just band.
Absolutely. Yeah. We get intense about it. Like, I know I get really intense, really focused on it, but at the end of the day, like, it's about working together, learning how to be better people through music. And, along the way, if we get really good at our instruments, that's pretty cool too.
Yeah.
Spencer, have any final thoughts?
No, I think this was a great talk. I really had fun kind of getting to chat with you guys about music. This is, with coronavirus being what it is, I feel like there haven't been as many opportunities to kind of talk shop and talk music. So this was cool. I appreciate you guys for inviting me on. This was fun.
Yeah. Well, thanks. We appreciate you guys both very much for taking an hour out of your day or so to spend with us. So, Michael, we're not playing anything outro, are we?
Do you want an outro?
No.
You don't want to do it? It's like it's not very professional to do an outro.
Well, we can just say bye. That's pretty professional.
Okay. Bye.
Awesome.
Oh, Michael has the power.
Okay, we're still back. All right, over and out from the interwebs.
Right.